can you close the video, please?
Yes, ma'am.
The panelists are not able to open the video. You remember in the beginning, I said I'm unable to open my video. Can you check that part of it, please? It looks like we lost one speaker now. Bruna is not visible. Yeah, we have Bruna back. We just give it a minute for Andrea to join us from Argentina.
Jayashree, ma'am.
All of you and some of you youngsters with us to be able to speak about this topic. And I'm really excited to be part of this journey with you. So to begin with, let me just quickly share my screen. I would like to do a quick welcome to Dr. Basavaraju R. Shrestha. Dr. Basavaraju is the Executive Director of GRAM India and also the National Coordinator for this working group, Delivering Democracy. So here we have Dr. Basavaraju with us. Over to you for a quick introduction.
Thank you, Jayashree.
Over to you for a quick introduction, Basavaraju.
Oh, okay. It's my time, right? Okay. Firstly, my thanks to all the panelists today for taking time to join and share their thoughts and the work here related to democracy. I would like to address all the participants who have been taken part in today's webinar as crusaders of democracy, because in one or the other way we keep working to strengthen and deepen democracy in our own way actually. And it's good morning for some of you and good afternoon and good evening for all of us in India. I'm truly honored to be a host of this webinar as a national coordinator of Delivering Democracy Working Group. We at this working group under G20 and C20 in India consider this as a privilege to have an opportunity to host speakers from different G20 nations. Today we have from Brazil, South Africa, Italy, Argentina, and India, and also an engaged audience from various parts of the country and also other G20 nation. Indeed, it's a matter of pride for all of us in India uh, to host variety of engagements during our G20 presidency with the theme Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. That means one earth, one family, one future. Friends, of G20 presidency, our Honorable Prime Minister gave a call to make this G20 a people's campaign and not just a government program. We under Delivering Democracy Working Group, taking this G20 to the grassroots. We are engaging various sections of community from students to local self-government members, that is Panchayat, what we call here, our village councils, our urban councils, and to parliamentarians, and also engaging academicians. For example, today we have an XIMB as our esteemed academic partner, Xavier Institution from Bhubaneswar. And to tell you, and all of you democracy champions from various G20 nations. Through this webinar series, our objective is to learn from all the G20 nations, especially the best practices, udaharans, and also the solutions for some of the issues which we are facing from decades, how it can be solved in an innovative way with some of the experiences of other country, which we can leverage to solve the same problem in some other country. And youth for democracy and youth-led democracy is the topic of the discussion today. And we are aware, those who are working with youth, about the challenges of youth participation in democracy. While youth bring in demographic dividend, it is also required to be deliberated whether they are bringing democratic dividend also. And unfortunately, the recent indexes or indices about their civic participation and political participation not giving us the sense that somewhere we are having a democratic dividend also with the demographic dividends. So we need to probably deliberate more on it and find ways how we can actively engage youth. And I'm sure the discussion today we are having will throw some light on those issues. And well, I think it would not be inappropriate if I use a minute to introduce GRAM to all of you, especially our international speakers and panelists who have come today. We at GRAM, engaging with all the 4 stakeholders of development through our evidence-based policy engagement activities in India. GRAM researches issues at the grassroots and work with policymakers more closely, not only as a think tank, but also as a think, act, and engage tank. The organization, which was just an idea a decade ago, which was independently started without any seed capital or funding, now works across country, handled over 120 projects, works with over 10 international research and academic think tanks and organizations, and over 50 national level agencies in India. We at GRAM taken coordination of this G20 engagement, democracy engagement group as an opportunity to build and sustain solidarity among the civil society organization working for democracy and good governance. I thank all our partners, especially CYST, for being our regional coordinator in delivering democracy working group. Special thanks to Jagadananda ji for also accepting to be a moderator of this session, and XIMB and Professor Pepin and his leadership and all the team members for being an institution partner, also some of them taking part in the program today. And I thank our esteemed international coordinator of Delivering Democracy Working Group, Benedetto, for constantly helping us and supporting us in making this webinar series more effective and successful. And I thank HSF for their Ansidal Foundation for their generous support and also being a partner in all this endeavor. And namaste once again, and welcome to all of you. And I look forward to witness this enriching webinar. Thank you so much. Over to Jayashree.
Thank you, Dr. Basavaraju. I'll now call upon our international coordinator, Benedetto. Benedetto has been a big support and a backbone to this whole webinar series. You can't find somebody as energetic as him and as dynamic as him handling this specific portfolio of the international coordinator. Can I request you, Benedetto, to quickly introduce yourself to the audience?
With pleasure. So I'm speaking from Italy. I'm the president. Thank you. I'm speaking from Italy. I'm currently the president of ICARDA, the International Coalition of Sustainable Cities of UNESCO, and also president of the European Coalition of Cities Against Racism and Discriminations, based in Europe, and partner with UNESCO. So that's all for the moment, and I think that's we don't have to waste our time. I'm eager to listen from the youth, because if the youth led democracy, so let them also lead our discussion. So I give the floor to the follower.
Thank you, Benedetto. Thanks for the crisp introduction and opening. Jagdanandji, over to you for a quick introduction.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Jayashree, and good morning, good evening to all of you. You know, it's a pleasure to moderate this conversation in the next few minutes. But I represent Center for Youth and Social Development, and Center for Youth and Social Development is based out of India, in the eastern part of India, and we work on governance issues, on sustainable rural livelihood issues, and in building community resilience for disaster risk reduction. These are the three areas where we work, but one of the major piece of our work is how do you promote active citizenship? And I'm so delighted to be part of all of you, and looking forward to this opportunity of ensuring that we have a good conversation and we go back with some best practice ideas, and we are able to contribute and clarify as to how civil society, more so young people, youth, can deepen democracy in our respective countries. Thank you, Jayashree. Over to you.
Thank you. A webinar like this is not going to be successful unless we have the right expert panel joining us for this discussion. So today with us, we have Tibogo. Tibogo joins us from Activate Change Drivers. She's the Executive Director Programs at Activate, and has vast experience in strategy development, corporate social investment, facilitation, civic education, and training. And I think the biggest reason that she's here with us on the panel is that she's an advocate for youth development and civic education. So that's Tibogo for all of us. We are also joined by Andrea. If you see, Andrea has a very illustrious, strong profile. As a founder of one of the this organization which is championing a lot of social cause. Andrea joins us today. She's a businesswoman and also a philanthropist. Has done quite a bit of her work, and also is currently the G20 Empower representative, doing a lot of work with the women community, I would say. So that's Andrea for all of us. And the youngest on the panel is Bruna. And Bruna is an enthusiastic young leader you can see in the area of political education. She has been the student ambassador to the United Nations Development Program, and actively promoting various causes involved with the youth. And I think I just like this whole way that she described herself. She believes that youth is not the future, but the present leaders in the advocacy world, and that every person's work and impact has a role in changing the shape and future of our country. And that's Bruna for us this in this webinar panel. Over to you, Jagdanandji, for a quick moderation.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, welcome back again. And, you know, in the true spirit of youth-led democracy, youth for democracy, I would be very happy to welcome all of you. And the order of the panelists and their presentation would be, I have changed a little bit. I would like to start with Bruna, actually, and the youngest of the panel. And also, you know, and we would like to hear Bruna's dreams, aspirations, hopes, and also some of the best practices model which she does through her work and through other civil society-led activities in her region and in her country. So the design of the conversation would be, each of you, I would request you to spend initially 7-8 minutes if you can, right? Maximum 10 minutes in the first go. And then we complete one round. And in the meantime, there will be questions also on the chat box. I will encourage all of you to come in the chat box and raise your questions, raise your pointers. And then we'll have a second round if we have the time, and respond to some of the questions, clarify some of the questions, and then take back with us the memory of this webinar, ideas from this webinar, and some good points from this webinar so that we can deepen our respective work actually. Thank you, Benedito, for the support. Thank you, Dr. Basabraju, and thank you, Jayasree, for really, facilitating on behalf of GRAMA. And, GRAMA has really taken a very interesting, serious, and very committed role in orchestrating this conversation, both nationally and globally. And I'm so happy that the entire team of GRAM is involved. We are only, a kind of a pie in the cake. We are not the cake. The cake is GRAM actually, right? So with these words, over to you, Bruna. Bruna Almeida.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Today I'm joining from Brasilia, which is the capital of Brazil, and it's a pleasure to be with you all and to share a little bit of my experience in working with various civil society organizations. Today I'm representing Globalizando, which is an organization, a non-governmental organization that helps political education. Also, the strategic program from my university, which I coordinate in helping democratize access and engage university educational practices with society and sustainable development here. And also the working group for the 2030 agenda here in Brazil that is a group of over 50 organizations here that work with sustainable development in various sector areas. So it's a pleasure to have presented them all. But firstly, I would like to talk a little bit about how I got here and what made me want to work with you. So I just started engaging with political education when I was in my first year of high school. I had a teacher about debates, and he would always say to us that a really big quote when going in a debate is that there is only a victory if everyone wins. And I stand by it to this day in all the organizations and work I do. But mainly I talk in including youth in this conversation because there will only be a victory if youth is in it, if youth is represented, if youth is in advocacy, and therefore we must feel empowered in knowing that we belong to the discussion and we must be represented. However, in Brazil, the situation is not like this. So giving a little bit of context, 40% of youth in Brazil are in poverty situation. Youth between 25 to 34 years old, about only 21% of them have concluded higher education, and from 18 to 24, only 18.1% are in higher education right now. So we see the numbers and we think, okay, so if education is the main driving factor for people to start engaging with positive change in our society, if only 1/5 of the next generation's leaders, which I believe that are this generation's leaders and the main people in advocacy to shaping the future of Brazil, are not in university right now or not studying in a formal context, how are we going to change the situation if they don't even have the access to a basic knowledge to be the professionals in civil society organizations, in our government, and in the private sector. So we need to change the situation. But how are we going to do this? Various civil society organizations here articulate in different manners. So we have articulation with government and private sector, spreading knowledge on a specific theme, promote programs and events to engage youth in political activity, producing content around a certain topic. But in my case, and what I will talk about is that the main two situations in which I act. It is the spread of knowledge on a specific theme, especially regarding sustainable development and youth, and the promotion of programs and events to engage youth in political activity and political learning. Because for what I've seen is that youth does not want to be led by someone. We do not want to be passive learners and just sit and hear what others have to say. Even though it is important, in order to learn, we actually need to act and be the main characters in the context of our learning development, our engagement, our advocacy. So the initiative I lead as general director is called Globalizando Modo United Nations, which is not a regular Modo United Nations. We basically engage youth that has never had access to any type of political education or any type of structured discussions to different committees every single year, maybe 2 to 3 times in a year, in pressing matters that Brazil faces today. So educational reforms, taxation reforms, everything that you think about that is going in the Congress right now that affects us as youth and that will affect us in the future is being discussed in these committees by delegates that are essentially youngsters that had never had the access to this type of learning. So in Brazil, this type of learning is focused mainly on capitals and in big centers, but we have various different regions, like the Amazon, the south of the country, we have the Northeast, and there people don't know this type of things exist. And if they don't even know they can discuss about it, how will they act on it in the future? So this is the main activity that we have been developing, promoting webinars on how to discuss these themes, what are the topics, how you can engage, how you can, represent someone that is leading a certain thought in these reforms. And lastly, we go to the events day when all the youngsters represent a certain parliament, a certain political party, and discuss these pressing matters. And essentially, they just discover that, yes, they are in the conversation, they can be a part of it, and they are important to finding solutions to it as well. And the second piece of work that I do is producing content around sustainable development goals. That is something that is not widely known here in Brazil. And as a development nation, and also considering the potential regarding the natural resources and also the in-person resources for development, sustainable practices here, it is very important that people are aware of the existence of the Sustainable Development Goals, the 2030 Agenda, and how we can implement them in different areas. So we have partnerships with other civil society organizations, and we act on giving lectures, engaging with the government, engaging with other civil societies, as and also about trying to implement in various areas of society, like in a project of producing short films that go around the themes of the 2030 agenda in ways of spreading the word in different formats so that everyone has access to it. And lastly, I would like to say that a lot more than talking about what I did, I would like to tell how can others do similar things or start engaging, because sometimes you hear people talk about their stories and what they are doing, but how did they get there and where is the starting point? So I always wonder, there are two options that you can think of. Maybe you know exactly what you want and where you want to act, and maybe you don't know. But in both situations, I would recommend you to look for organizations locally or internationally that promote work around the topic that you're interested in. You can act on promoting events on political matters, study groups, spreading knowledge, advocacy in STEAM, and also teaching a certain specific topic that you're interested in and know a lot more, or articulating with other organizations. And you can, not only work with strategic thoughts, but in many other ways, like in the media, administrative work that all organizations need, in the academic part, institutional relations, human resources, and all the work and all the work that you can put in is, I believe, from my experience, always welcome in these organizations, because we always need more people in order to achieve our goals and to achieve a better future for us all. So if you know exactly what you want, you should go for it and look in Google for organizations for you to volunteer in, maybe virtually, maybe in your community, being a leader in your community. And if you don't know, which was my situation, I would try to explore what seems interesting at first glance. I'm an international relations student, so I try to focus on human rights study groups, acting as a delegate in political discussions and relations, consultation on international trade and sustainable development goals. So by that, I was slowly discovering what I liked the most. And by elimination, you shall better understand what fits you best. So later on, when you are already more engaged with it, you may be in a time where you start entering leadership positions, understanding more these strategic points and how you can act in other areas and what fits you best, and getting a glance of how you yourself be the role and also the leader in promoting this change. And from this moment on, I think you're set for choosing what fits best for you. If it is maybe creating a brand new organization and something you see that lacks in society, or acting as a leader in the organizations you have been working in, and trying to go into your professional life with this outlook and how you can promote change wherever you are, I think it's the best way to go, and essentially is what I try to do as well. But also, I think that we shouldn't rush into thinking we must be perfect in this work and in this journey, but mainly thinking that we are one person and one like pin in an entire network, and our work is impacting each other, and slowly by making small changes we will achieve what we want. So I think it is what I had to say on my side.
Thank you, Bruna. I think the message Bruna brings is, how do we really connect with a big agenda? And the big agenda which she sees as a young person from Brazil is the 2030 agenda, in which governments are engaged, in which multilaterals are engaged, and in which she feels, there is a possibility to engage from local to national to international. So then you experience the whole multilateralism. And then the second part is experiencing political education or going through political education through various events, experiencing parliament, the political parties, the processes, and the process for interaction, and the process for citizen engagement. And from a very early stage, when youngsters engage in this process, I think Bruna feels, they can be very matured, what you call citizens, who would be deepening democracy. Thank you, Bruna. And we'll take your other questions if there is any, and we'll come back to you. Now with this, let me move to Tobago. Tobago, as I said, first round, 8 to 10 minutes, and then I would like to reserve some time for the second round as well, right? So over to you, Tobago.
Thank you so much. I don't know if I'm audible. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Right, thank you. It's difficult to speak in 8 minutes about issues that you're passionate about. So I'll try to stick to that. I think, as Bruna has shared, that, for young people across G20 nations, we're living in both the best and the worst of times. And we're living in an era where the underpinning low levels of youth participation are not so much issues of apathy, but issues of engagement disconnect. So what kind of politics are young people being offered and put on the table, where political process are right now modeled more around persuasions? So vote for me, and then no discussions that happen post-elections, versus a political culture of discourse where young people can feel like they are heard around issues that are pertinent and important to them, where young people feel that there is a space for them to lead in the now, where young people feel that there are processes of accountability for which we can hold our leaders to account for. And so Activate's change drivers, our philosophy around the promotion of youth participation in democracy is, how do we connect young people? Because it is when we're mobilized that we're able to garner a greater sense of the collective voice for young people. It is also a prudent way of saying, how do we capacitate? So how do you harness the agency that young people have to be able to respond in their small ways, in their small spaces, in their small communities? How do we not lose the value of what little things can do and become when they come together as a country, as countries, and as nations? Also part of the philosophy of Activate is, how do we then make sure that we are able to connect young people to spaces in key decision-making processes where they can be heard? And this then is what we use as a mechanism to say, how do we shape how young people show up in democratic processes? So looking at the young person as a voter, one of the key questions that a young person in South Africa is asking, we are the majority, but 60% of us are unemployed. Why should I vote? Why is it important? If I'm still living in poverty, why should I show up as an active and accountable citizen? It's ensuring that the dissident voices also are heard, because the one mistake that we are making is not creating allowance for disagreement and for those who feel left out. And what we're seeing across the globe is that those voices are then what populists are using to create distractions and to destroy what we're trying to build on the other hand, which is what South Africa is sitting on right now. We are on the cusp of things either falling apart and disintegrating, or still be able to hold young people to still believe in the pursuance of this democracy. Issues of the Constitution, we have one of the greatest constitutions in the world as a country, which helped us shape who we are now. But young people are saying, I don't feel like this Constitution represents my needs in the now. And so how do we create spaces? So what Activate does is to create these spaces in communities, in marginalized communities, in rural areas, for these issues to be heard, because what we do not want and what we are avoiding is the sense that young people will feel that violent protest is the only way to be heard, which is something that mars youth participation and the wrong narrative that young people are apathetic. I mean, we have one of the lowest levels of youth voter turnout in South Africa. And whether we like it or not voting is a loud statement that young people are making to say, we do not trust what is currently put on the table. And we need to hear that. However, what we're saying is that is not the ideal, because that is not how the system works, and that is not how we are going to fix. And so we are saying, how do we allow you to express yourself freely, but also be able to build? Which are the capacities that young people are requiring. So what the models that we use is we go into grassroots communities. We train and we capacitate young people on civic education because it is a content field that you don't find in the school curriculum. You might find snippets of it in the news, you might find snippets of it in political rhetoric, but not really a sense where young people can really speak and interrogate what these concepts really mean, how they are lived, and anything that is not lived is not trusted. And that which is not trusted cannot be replicated. And so we're trying also in the partnerships, the kind of partnerships that activate bills. So we're working with the United Nations Development Program, with the Independent Electoral Commission in South Africa, and also key government departments that offer opportunities to young people. And what we're saying is all of us from this highest level need to come a level lower, where opportunities, information, discussions, and key concepts need to start meeting people where they are. We need to rework how we engage young people. So a lot of the times we speak of young people are spoken of as statistics, young people are spoken of as beneficiaries of programs, but not really utilized to the fullest extent of the value that they hold. I mean, historically in South Africa, we're going towards June month, we'll be celebrating the 1976 uprising, which was led by young people from the youngest age of 14, who were imprisoned because they stood up and they said, no, this is not the kind of education that we want. They were saying no, and this is not how we want it to be offered to us. And they did something about it. I mean, come post-democracy, we see young people who also stood up and said, but the limitations of the cost of accessing higher education should not be what keeps other people away. And so they stood for that. And so we now find fee-free higher education or support that has increased by the government. And so we see that young people do possess the ability to stand up. However, we're not elevating those spaces. And the biggest concern that we have is if we don't do that with a great sense of urgency, we might find ourselves in a very precarious situation that we might not be able to undo. One of the things that we are doing in the communities that we're working is young people are then trained to lead civic education workshops with their peers. And what we also do then, so looking at key concepts of what is the Constitution and what does it mean, the concept of democracy and why is it important to protect it? Do we understand as communities how local government works? This being the most interfacing level of government that engages with community on a day-to-day basis. This is the level of government that ensures that you have water, that ensures that you have dignity, that ensures that you are safe. And so this is the level that almost always overlaps. And this is the level of government in South Africa that is not getting issues right in terms of service delivery. And so what we're saying is, how do we then bring young people to bring in the gaps, to be key partners with government? So we're promoting both citizen and public accountability. We're saying, how do we enable communities to lead interventions that speak of their own development? How do we enable to utilize the assets and the skills that young people have right there in their spaces? And one example is, we have a local councillor who's part of our youth network, who's working with the government to establish an economic hub for young people, young informal entrepreneurs, to say, how do we professionalize them? How do we give them the space to generate income? And some of the people who are coming into these programs are young people. The architects who are drawing these plans are young people. The people who are going to build this process are young people. In fact, the speaker to the municipality, which we speak of, is a young person. And so we also need to make sure that as young people showing up as voters, how do we ensure young people can also show up as public representatives themselves? How do we ensure that young people can lead today? So while we are working towards the 2030 agenda, is there a space now for young people to feel that they can be heard and walk and work towards something that is much greater in the future? We are working at how to close the loop within the electoral cycle. So what conversations need to be had at the societal level? Because right now we're heading towards 2024. There's an information overload that is thrown at young people. How do you process? Because the key question now in South Africa is, if we do not trust our government, then who? And so one of the key things that we're bringing into this conversation is how young people can use policy conversations, bringing in the key action plans and the policies of political parties for young people to engage with as a tools for critical decision-making leading up to the election. So how do we simplify technical terms and issues that communities are not really able to engage with at their level, and bring it down to the level that people can interact with and find resonance with it? So those are some of the things. And just lastly is, what is not seen is also something that people cannot buy into. So what we are looking at is we are working with various stakeholders to say, in the communities where civic education workshops are being led by our ambassadors, how do we enable them to lead interventions as youth collectives? And as I've said, one of them is this economic hub where young people are working as cooperatives, because there needs to be a linkage between what we speak of and what is lived by people. The reason people question democracy, the reason young people will feel that we might as well lose all of it, is because it is not within close proximity to them. And those are the things that we are trying to work towards undoing. But I have to say that the work of change is hard work. It's not easy, but it's doable. It's doable, and really the thing that you can't measure, which activate also is working towards, is how to keep hope alive. You cannot put it on a report, but it is certainly one thing that keeps people going from one day to the next. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Tebego. You just heard Tebego from South Africa, right? And the message she brings through this panel conversation is, how do we convert this apathy to engagement? And in a very structured way. And that means activating the change drivers, capacitate them, and bring accountability in a big way, actually, between citizens and the institutions of governance and the political system. And she brings these three very interesting education: voter education for young people, civic education on constitution, democracy, and policy conversation with the policymakers, as the three distinct, ways in which this engagement and the conversation can take place. Thank you so much, Tebego. I will now request, since you heard about, from Bruna and Tobago, one from Brazil and the other one South Africa, before we move to Argentina, I would like you to use the Q&A box, actually, not the chat box. Please use the Q&A. You can press Q&A and then put your questions there, and we will try to, the panelists and all of us will try to respond to that. So please activate the Q&A, and there are some hands. After Andrea is done, I will also allow few who have raised their hand also to come in. Now over to Andrea, please. And that is Andrea from Argentina. Over to you, Andrea.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I am an economist, but I make a living from agriculture and cattle production in small rural city in Argentina. However, I dedicate 95% of my time for working for financial and labor inclusion, equality, as well as good governance. But I am doing this in two ways. Fleur Foundation, which focuses in responsible leadership and organization, preparing women to break the glass ceiling, to reach to high level management, and the most vulnerable women to think, to dream, and then find financial inclusion as a way to have freedom to choose what they want. We built a big network that aims to build more equitable, sustainable, diverse, and inclusive organizations. So we like to say that we are the bridge between the positive change that people and organizations need to create a better society. And the second way is resilience, a mutual warranty, which provides collateral and advice to entrepreneurs and small companies with collaterals and consultancy to have the financial independence. I prepared some slides to share with you Argentinian experience in democracy. And so I am trying to give to you the context. In 2013, we have the youth vote, sorry, 1 minute, that is implementing, extending the right to vote to 16 and 17 years old, which has led to their incremental, yet no mandatory electoral participation. 2023, Argentina is celebrating 40 years of interrupted democracy, achieved through the eradication of political violence and acceptance that elections are the only legitimate form of the transfer of power. What the young people think about this? More than 40 young people value voting as a right. More than 52% feel that their ideas are not represented by political parties or public officials. And 60% responded that they should have representation in Congress, reserved seats or quotas. Sorry. Oh, sorry. What concerns young people in Argentina? More than 30% indicated that the quality of education was of the utmost importance. 58% consider that the school does not provide the necessary skill for insertion into the labor market. Another topic of priority was digital skills training. And as we know, we have 17 goals in next years. And one of them is about quality education. When more people can access quality education, they can escape the cycle of poverty, reduce inequalities, promote healthier and more sustainable lives life of lives, contribute to citizen engagement and the development of nation. 65% of young people currently in school will work in fields that currently do yet not exist yet now. What problems do we see today in Argentina's young people with respect to political representation? There is insufficient participation of young people in political parties. Although they are young people interested in the political sphere, they hold very few public offices. There is disappointment about politics and its potential, which alienates young people. Party affiliation has generated a rift which affects the continuity of public policy. But what do they think about their right to vote? of course, this is a job prepared for this organization, no? But 19% think that voting should accompany by other forms of political participation. 42% think that there should always be electoral participation because it is an earned right. And 23% think that the participation should only take place if there is an option that truly represents them. Some best practices, I think, is important. One is encourage and value responsible leadership. Current political leaders that prepare their successors and promote their participation. So the old people, we need prepare more young people to work with them. Recover the legitimacy of the public spheres as a space for positive change. We need their trust in politics. Promote responsible and informed voting through the construction of political criteria. Promote organizations that bring the political reality closer to this population. And train teachers for better civic education in school. Because in Argentina, we have civic education in the school, but maybe the teachers, the professor need to be more prepared. What we think in Flor Foundation about responsible leaders, they need open and adaptive mindset, conscious about their influence, awareness of the values they represent, contemplate all the stakeholders, dialogues, listen, build network, be accountable, develop others, prepare succession, and appreciate diversity. We believe it's very important to talk about diversity now. So responsible leaders will build responsible organization. Responsible organization will build responsible society. Why it is important to encourage the youth participation in democracy? This is our context. The context is fragile, brittle, unstable, so also anxious. We cannot predict, and so this generate anxiety and agitation in the social components. Individual actions seem to have no impact, but if all do different things in our meter, we can change. No linear context. We cannot prevent to understand the reality, and incomprehensible. The context is ambiguous and illogical. So we need, in this context, to be more creative, more proactive, more innovators. And because this, we need diversity. We understand diversity is gender diversity, is more youth, it's different culture. So we need to create better solutions, and we need people who think different. I love to say, I write a book some years ago, and I put this because it's very important that the future of the companies, institution, organization, and countries depend on all of us. Things do not change if we do not change our attitude. Choosing the evolution of our environment and the society we live implies assuming the responsibility of being agent of change, first individually, in order to change the reality around us. The future of the world needs the youth. The youth are the future of the world. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrea, for a very provocative, thought at the end. the future of the world is dependent on youth, and the demographic profile which we see now, the next decade is the decade of young people. And maybe after a decade, the demographic profile is likely to change in India, as I can see very clearly now. And thank you for bringing the wonderful dimensions of how important it is for deepening civic education and networking amongst ourselves to build a society with resilience, to look at the kind of development which ordinary citizens and the youngsters are dreaming, right? Thank you so much. I think after this first round, I will still encourage those of you to come in the Q&A, and let me see if there is one question from Chetan. Warm welcome and gratitude to every speaker and organizers. From Munade Social Organizers. What are all the strategies and methods we can include in imparting the accountability in youths, right? You know, deepening democracy requires accountability at both ends, actually. And both ends means, you know, we need accountable citizens and at the same time accountable leaders. That is what I see is something which is necessary. And to do that, I think all the three panelists have emphasized the need for a more robust civic education, more robust voter education for young people, more robust policy conversation at the local level, at the provincial level, at the national level, as well as at the international platform. And when all this happens, probably we are able to move further. Jayashree has also requested, I think, Baisali to come through the question and answer. If she has any question, I can see she had one hand which was raised. And Baisali Singh, can you come through the Q&A, please?
I can allow her to talk if she wants to. So,
Baisali, would you like to come in? Yeah, okay. Please allow her.
Vaishali, you can now speak.
And introduce yourself and say your point very clearly. If you want to add anything or raise any questions to the panelists, you can do so. Over to you, Baisali.
Vaishali, if you're speaking, maybe you're on mute. Can you just check that? We are unable to hear you.
You are unmuted, Baisali. Please go ahead if you want to say something. Okay. Then you have, Baisali, you were given the opportunity to say, and then I can go to Madhusudan Hanumappa. How can we make the participation of the youth innovative and engage with them on a continuous basis through their education years? Any methodologies in this direction, right? So I think that is the provocation to all the panelists, right? How do you continuously engage with young people? And what are the methodologies you think has really worked actually? And Baishali, would you like to come in? Hello, you were unmuted. You are not using this opportunity. Please come in.
Can I be allowed to say something? Actually, there is some problem with technology. Can you hear me?
Yes. Who is this, please?
I am Pepin speaking.
Yes, Dr. Pepin, please go ahead.
I have been trying to, send messages through chat box that was not allowed. Then question answer I sent, probably nobody read. There is some problem either from my end or even. Okay, is it okay if I say something?
Please say if you know whatever you want to say.
Yeah. First of all, I would like to thank all the three speakers for their eloquent expression of views in no uncertain terms. And some of the views were very, very strong and very, very relevant. But I have just only one question when now I am reflecting on the theme of our webinar. We are talking about youth for democracy. I am wondering whether we should call it democracy for youth. So that is the message I am getting after listening to them. Do we really have democracy? If yes, is that democracy for the youth? That is the question I would like to ask. Why I'm saying is, if you look at the foundations of democracy such as justice, freedom, human rights, and the way things are happening in the world, as some of the speakers have already spoken, there is hardly any space for the youth. Therefore, we need to question the very definition of democracy itself before we talk about, youth for democracy. That is the point I wanted to make. Thank you.
Very good point. Very good point. Thank you, Pepin. Professor Pepin is the dean from the Xavier Institute, University, which is the academic partner of this particular program, and a wonderful professor who always, tries to help youngsters to accumulate critical mind, to question the system, working with the system, and also, understand this whole concept of sustainability and democracy. Thank you, Professor Pepin. So now I can, open the floor now, and the floor open is for the panelists to respond. If Bruna would like to respond, what are the innovative ways to sustain our work with the youngsters in deepening democracy, in engaging young people for deepening democracy? Start with Bruna, and then Tobago and Andrea in that order. And Benedetto also, if you want, you can come in.
Okay, perfect. From my side, what I've been seeing is that the engagement from the youngsters will only happen when they feel that they are in charge of the organizations and in charge of the decision-making process. So from the various organizations I've been part of, most of them were student-led or young-led organizations. And the engagement I saw, and it was made by you, for you, the engagement I saw by all people is that we all had this drive, this fears for changing situations we were very passionate about in all matters. So being in teaching languages, in active political education like I do today, we need to feel like our voice is heard and we are part of the organization in a strategic level. So how can we do that? Is basically the majority of organizations I see in the traditional level, they are really hierarchical in terms of a vertical hierarchy. So in the more young organizations I've been part of, the situation was shifted in order we have a more horizontal type of hierarchy. So the leaders of the teams or the leader of the organization always has direct contact with all the volunteers. Everyone has a place to speak. Everyone is heard in general meetings. The ideas, the discussions we are placing, the strategic manners we are trying to implement with each other, that everyone is always made aware of and trying to be included. If you want to say something, you have a place to say it, and you're treated as basically not someone, although we are all learning and we have a lot to learn still because we do not have that much experience. I think the outlook when you didn't have the experience. I think the outlook you have in when you did not experience the world and you just see what needs to be changed, and you have these big dreams and aims of changing the society is very insightful and creative, and it's really helpful in order to create solutions and strategies and how things can be done. So from my side, what I see, how can you continually engage young people, putting them in leadership positions? If the organization has a structured plan, put young people by the side of someone that is actively making these decisions, make a council for others to actually know that what they think is being taken to the organization, make discussions like I do with other youngsters regarding pressing matters to our society, and bring the solutions to the general public, make this public for everyone to know, and acknowledge their inputs in what's being said in the conversation. So throughout my experience, this is what I see that works best. Because all the times that we are passive learners and things are put, this was created for young people, and this we believe that they should do this and this and that, but they are not included in the decision-making process of creating these tools and creating these strategies. I usually see that there is not that much engagement from them because they want to feel heard and they want to feel like they are part of the process. And regarding the question about we live in a democracy, and is democracy for youth or youth for democracy? I believe that there is not a specific answer. Every country would be a little different in the manner. In Brazil, if you see democracy as the representatives of this the people, you would have a hard time saying we have a representative democracy, as most of the people in the government are old white men between over 60 years, 65 to 59, that have had the opportunity to attend university, that have had the opportunity to have their basic needs met, which is not the situation for 40% of youngsters that are in poverty situation right now. So if you see through this lens of the how can I say it, the definition of what is democracy, we would have a hard time saying that youth is included. But our point, I think, in the webinar is like youth for democracy. So what can we do to be included? Because at the same time that we need to have a space to be included, we need to create a space for ourselves as well. We need to take accountability for we should not be given things to our hands all the time. The space for us to create solutions should exist, but also we should fight for them.
Thank you. Thank you, Bruna. Over to Tobago, South Africa.
I think my bandwidth is quite low. Oh, there it is. I think what Bruna said is quite critical. That which is not held by the youth is not going to work, but if it does, it doesn't work for long. So those are some of the things that we've learned. We've learned also that what works in school must be lived in community. So how do we create spaces of active citizenship? So aligning this critical work of democracy for people to see a space and the value that they bring towards solving community issues is also really about connecting young people to engage across the isms, across race, across religion, across culture, across political lines, And how do we inculcate a culture where we can enable young people to find themselves, to focus on the issues? Because that is a lot of times that what fragments the youth voice. We don't always all have to be saying the same thing or agreeing on the same issues, but how do we create the space for the convergence of divergent thoughts for young people so that nobody feels that they are alienated? What we also need to do is, you know, Coca-Cola advertises their products over and over as if they've never done it before, but we have not really invested in where these key issues and concepts are seen. We're going to be creating picnics for engaging young people with voter education material for the first time, because we also don't want to remove young people from the spaces that they are occupying. Where are the parks? Where are the other spaces where young people are convening? Are we having these conversations in the home? So a lot of the times I will miss out on my younger siblings if I'm not speaking to them about issues and not planting the seeds for stuff like that. I think it's also about creating the spaces for harvesting solutions. We all know what the challenges are, and if we stay there, if we stay in the parking lot of what doesn't work, we create a space of disillusionment and hopelessness and a burden on the shoulders of young people to feel that that which they want is not attainable. And just lastly is accountability. You see, when we speak of governments, we speak of people who occupy seats. And so we need to make sure, as Bruna was saying, that even as a young person, do I understand the mandate and my responsibility when I occupy a particular position or where I commit to a particular role? Do I understand what it means for others to come along with me? Can I be responsible enough? In South Africa, we have the issues of young people who are offered the sweet stuff. So we give you the sweet stuff, and we know that if we keep you quiet, there's nobody else to come through behind you. And so we need to find ways to say, are we accountable? Are we accountable enough as young people to create sustainable and sustaining legacies for future generations and to continue to pursue the struggle? One of the things is the issue of methods of accountability. What we also do is align young people to forums and platforms. It's in local government, for example, where you can hold the municipality to account, where you can access documents and the budgets for what you're saying you are delivering. People didn't know that they have rights and access to information such as that. And so how do we synthesize, like I said, how do we break down those technical aspects and narrow the horizon between the access that young people have to opportunities, information, networks, and resources for them to thrive? Because a youth populace that has nothing to lose is very dangerous.
Thank you. Thank you, Tebego. And now over to Andrea.
Yes, I was writing because maybe in a few minutes I need to go away. The first one is improve the self-confidence of young people in policy. The second is about quick impact. And I believe in quotas. So we need quotas for young people, for gender, for everything. We need quotas. And without shyness, no shyness. We need these voices in all the high levels. So as we need young, as we need women, as we need different and diversity, I believe the quotas is the good impact. And also, of course, education and good self-confidence in them, both things. And so sorry, because I need to go away. I have an emergency. Sorry, and thank you for inviting me. So thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. I think, thank you for really accepting the invitation at such a short notice and being available and sharing some of your wonderful thoughts and a beautiful framework of what you are doing on the ground and what you cherish to be, done around the world. Thank you so much, Andrea. Thank you. I think, friends, we heard these three, beautiful panel presentations of, and then one thing which was running all throughout these three presentations are what are the kind of expectations of the young people from the institutions of democracy, from the processes of democracy, and what are the opportunities and potential for young people to make democracy work actually, if we really promote active citizenship. But democracy, what came out very clearly is it's celebrating diversity, certainly. It's really recognizing the differences, including the excluded. And it's about accountability between citizens and the institutions of governance, from local government to the national government. And that can only come if there is a active civic engagement process in place, and more so, youngsters are enabled to occupy this space of active citizenship. Today, unfortunately, the passive citizenship is growing and active citizenship is becoming, lesser and lesser, right? People have stopped questioning actually the system. In India, we have seen, when we got the voting right for the youngsters at the age of 18, from the civil society, we worked with the Election Commission of India, which is responsible for election management, right? Of the provincial elections as well as the federal election to the parliament. And the chief election commissioner at that time, he agreed. He said, yes, we are going to suddenly get a lot of young people who will be able to vote now. They have a voting right. So along with the Election Commission of India, we identified a program which was run by the Election Commission of India, that is Youth Unite for Voter Awareness. And the program is called YUVA. It's run by the Election Commission of India in collaboration with support of civil society organizations and governments all around the country. And that's a beautiful program in which new voters who join the bandwagon of holding their voting right are told about their obligations, their responsibilities, their duties, as well as their rights also. I think this is a very interesting program, but this requires a further deepening also around the country, in remote areas, in the rural areas, amongst the indigenous communities, and amongst the poorest poor areas and the excluded pockets actually. That is one. The second one, civil society has been very active in India in pushing and promoting social accountability in a big way, whether it is citizen report cards, whether it is community scorecards, whether it is social audit. These three things are very, very important actually. How do you really ensure accountability? There has to be a very clear accountability framework. And that framework, if it doesn't, so therefore, in 2005, when we have this right to information, which is a transparency law in India, and many of you would have been part of the transparency laws in your respective countries. But in India, when the transparency law came up, I think there was a big euphoria around the country. And the euphoria was because it was looking like a second freedom struggle, actually, second freedom win, when citizens have got an opportunity to demand accountability by seeking information, and the system is bound to provide information. Citizens can inspect records, documents, work. Citizens can take samples. So therefore, in the preamble of the information law, it was democracy requires an informed citizenry. And information is power. So I would say transparency, accountability, these two are very important elements of democracy. And I have seen at some point of time, I was the State Information Commissioner from civil society. And in my role, I have seen how young people, when they use the transparency handle, how happy they feel towards the end of the day, actually. They're able to raise a question, they're able to demand accountability, and accountability is given. So the point here is, how do you spread the transparency law and the transparency accountability handle more deeper? That is the essence, actually. Third one I saw from my experience in India, and also listening to all of you, to all three of you, this voter education for young people, voter education for the voters, voter awareness program. We had a decentralized governance. We had a constitutional amendment. That means, giving definite powers, defining the tenure, ensuring that elections take place in local government. When this new law came, there was a massive, effort by civil society to push voter education and voter awareness. And then the third one was, around that, in many provincial governments and in the national law, there is a reservation for women. And many provincial governments have gone beyond the, what you call federal reservation policy of women. And they have even, in my state, my province, we have more than 50%, and Karnataka also is 50%. So there are many states who are women's representation is 50%. How do you really then motivate girls, women, our sisters, or that class actually to come and participate in election? And once they come, then the next course of action for civil society was capacitating women representatives, capacitating young women representatives, and more so general women representatives to participate, to also, participate effectively and take this role more seriously.
So one interruption, Jagdanandji.
Yes, Meenakshi.
I think this is like a very interesting topic, and time boxing discussion on this topic is the most difficult part of what we have to do, right? So I would want you to transition to Benedetto for the summary and the closing.
Over to you, Benedetto.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this really wonderful webinar and the position of the speakers that I thanks really fondly. De verdade, obrigado. Porque quando eu ouço falar em português, para mim é como estar na casa minha. Mas bom, sorry for this moment of Portuguese, but so I lived 2 years in Brazil, and for me, when there is Brazilian on the field, it's like to feel at home. But it's okay. So let me say that speaking about you, speaking with you, is not always, is never easy. I think that 1 hour and a half is not enough, but it's not enough 1 life and a half. It's a process like humanity seen from the beginning, I think. So let me say that our word that all the 3 panelists and also our fantastic moderator and the audience said was education, civic education, 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 education. I think that we have 3 levels. The first level is the level of education, is the level in which to you, there is this passing of knowledge, but as not to be a knowledge that is so, let me say, pointed in the particular. But we as adults have in that time of youth to give them a framework, the alphabet of the novel that is the life in the community. Then they, with that alphabet, has to write their own statement. This is life. The second level is the civil society. That is the training field in which you can continue your education in a community life, and you can interpol your previous education, that is an academic education and a civic education, in the real life. helping in some particular situation, because we know that one of the, under bracket, limits of the civil society is that obviously is pointed in one topic, not all the topics. Then there is the third level. The third level is politics. Politics is the broader field, because politics has to keep together all the elements of the human life. And in there, the politicians, has to serve with this certainty that they have to give to the society and to the youth in particular spaces in which their voices can be heard, but not just because in this sense they can absolutely vote for me, but because the future belong above all to youth. And being a politician is to manage the present, but to prepare the future, in which usually, if nature do its work, they won't be there. This is the first duty of the politicians. These three levels has to be like ways that communicate between them. Education, civic education, civil society, and that civic education, civil society, and politics. They can absolutely stay together. This is one of the sense for me of this webinar and this series of webinar, being in the C20, that is part of the G20, having spaces in which your voices can be heard. And it's our responsibility that at the G20 and the G20 in September, your voice has to be heard. So thank you very much to participating, and thank you for your voice, your statement, and your thoughts.
Thank you, Benedict. Thank you.
A great
Over to you,
evening.
Jayashree.
Great evening, passionate discussions, great speakers, good moderation. What else to ask for? It was a great webinar today. So thank you all for participating and supporting us in this event. And thank you all participants for listening in and raising your questions in the chat. Look forward to meeting you all in the near future. Thank you again.
Maybe we can promise at least when the report is ready, those of you who have registered and given your contact details will be very happy to post it somewhere so that you can access them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Mm.